I'm gonna let it go. Oh.
Well, good morning. It is truly an honor to be with you today. Thanks so much for coming out. You know, we live in this culture where we all kind of consider ourselves professional reviewers. It seems like every website you go to, every app, every product you buy, every service you use seems to be ending with this phrase, rate your experience. Rate your experience. I'm waiting for them to come and ask about toothpaste, you know? I mean, what are you supposed to say? Squeezed well, minty as advertised, right? But we start to do this. I don't know if you found yourself doing this, but you start to do this in your everyday life. Like in our house, I tend to make the coffee every morning, and I typically will at some point during the morning ask my wife, Amy, how was the coffee today? And I'm hoping one day she's going to say 5 out of 5 stars, right? 5 out of 5 stars. I'm hoping it's pretty good, but I'm hoping for 5 stars one of these days. And imagine if you maybe started rating someone's friendship. Well, he responds quickly to texts. You know, he remembered my birthday. He helped me move once, but he does repeat his stories from time to time, 4.5 stars. But do you remember when we just did stuff in life? Like, remember when we just lived life instead of reviewing it all the time? Like, my dad never rated his lawn mowing experience, right? He just mowed the lawn, put the mower away, and went on with his day. No Facebook posts, no stars in his feature, no social media advertising that he mowed the lawn today. But unfortunately, this also happens in church, doesn't it? Love the worship vibe, super cozy. Fresh coffee was a nice touch. The sermon was a little long. The pastor's handshake was a little fast. 3.5 stars. It's hard to avoid, isn't it? Yet I don't think this is what Jesus had in mind when he created this thing called church. Have you and I maybe become so review happy that we're not even reviewing the right things anymore? Because here's the thing. In a review culture, we review things that we consume, products that we use, places that we go. But we don't review something that we are. See, there's a big difference between sitting in rows at a church and living in community with one another. And here's the hard truth that I want to unpack with you today, is that you can sit in church for years and years and never become the church that Jesus dreamed of. And so today, I want to challenge you to give up going to church. I want you to give up going to church. We're in this series called Giving It Up. And we're talking about what we can give up that stands in the way or hinders our connection with God and our connection with other people. And it's one thing for us to go to church, but it's another thing for us to become the church. And I want to ground today's message in one of the first mentions of the church in the Bible, because I think it shows some original intentions that Jesus had when he created this thing called the church. Acts chapter 2, if you have your Bibles and you want to ground with me in Acts 2, verse 42, we'll look at some other verses as well, but we're going to use this as our main text. Let's read it. Let me read it for you, and you can follow along. In Acts 2, beginning with verse 42, it says, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." Now, this is more than an origin story. I think there's elements of design that you probably heard in those verses. So how do we become the church rather than just go to church? I'm going to give you 4 thoughts today. First is this. We've got to start by staying connected to the source. Stay connected to the source. I thought of that song that we opened our service with today called Every Beat. Every beat of our hearts are reminders of who is in charge and who gives us the very breath that we breathe. And it is God. It is this idea of staying connected. Every beat of our heart is connected to the source of our life. And that is God. So if we're going to become the church, we've got to make sure that the church is connected to the source. Acts 2:42 is started off by saying they devoted themselves. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship. And then a few weeks ago, we talked about this verse in John chapter 15, verse 5. It says, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So to become the church, we must start with this deep connection to Jesus. We have to start with fostering this deep connection with Jesus. A branch doesn't try hard to produce fruit, right? The apple tree is not sitting there like, oh, come on, I got to get some apples out of me. He doesn't try hard to do that. What he does, I don't even know why I'm calling him a he, but he's a he, right? He simply stays connected, actively attaching to the source of life, and then allowing that life to produce the fruit in the life. Have you ever seen cut flowers in a vase? They look alive, but they're already dying. They're beautiful for a minute, but they're no longer connected to life. And I think a lot of us live that way. We're arranged in a nice bouquet on Sunday, and then on Monday, we start wilting throughout the week because we are no longer connected to the source. And so becoming the church is about dwelling and abiding in the source of life. And I'm telling you, it's too easy to assume this one. It's too easy to just kind of assume that it's happening. And then before you know it, and I've been around church my whole life, you will find yourself, as I know I have many times, trying hard to be a good Christian. And then failing. Why? Because it's up to you. It's up to you to pull it off. It's up to you to become a good Christian. And what Jesus, I believe, would tell us today is, hey, focus on getting good input. Focus on creating a good environment for growth. Take some steps of faith, yes, but then watch what I do in you and through you. Stay connected to the source. The early church was devoted to the Bible and was devoted to growing daily. Trust me, when you make this shift, you will get so much more out of church because you will show up differently. And you'll want to help other people too. And that leads us to our second thought, to engage in authentic community. To engage in authentic community. I love this picture in Acts 2. He says, and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. There seems to be this shared life. These folks were doing life together. They weren't just attending the same church. They were doing life. They were sharing life, their joys, their hardships, their challenges, even those areas of their lives that maybe they were a little embarrassed about. They were sharing that life together. Ephesians chapter 4, one of my favorite chapters in all the Bible, in verse 15 says, "Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become in every respect the mature body of Him who is the head, that is Christ. From Him, the whole body, joined and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as what? As each part does its work." See, to become the church, we all must be intentionally involved. It's not something that just happens. We have to be intentional about it. Which means, I'll just shameless plug, if you're not on one of our serving teams right now, I would challenge you, if you consider this church to be your church, get on one of the serving teams. Most of them are like once a month that you serve, but at least it's an opportunity for you to get in the game and say, hey, all hands in the middle. Let's see what God can do as we pool our gifts and resources and abilities and see how God might use them to build up the church. But it also means that we need to show up each week asking not, I hope the service is good today, I hope the sermon is good, I hope the music is good, but rather asking ourselves, as you walk in those doors, how can I encourage someone today? God, give me eyes to see who I might connect with today, that I might speak life into them today. God, give me the eyes to see those people. Come in with an attitude of saying, how can I serve today, rather than how can I consume today? And I'm not saying that God won't meet you here and God won't speak into your life, but show up differently. And when you leave, instead of saying, oh, yeah, the music was a little off, the sermon was a little long, instead of evaluating that, evaluate how were you the church today? How was I the church today? Who did I meet? Who did I encourage? Who did I speak life to? Can you imagine what church would be like if we all showed up this way every Sunday? Not what can I get, but what can I give today? Can you imagine what church would be like all across this country if we all just showed up as believers and said, how can I be the church rather than how can I go to church? It would change everything. And let me just share a sobering reality with you. It is really difficult to be the church for an hour, 2 to 3 times a month. That's the average time that people attend a church service. These are people who say, this is my church. They usually show up about 2 to 3 times a month. So I want to challenge you, if you're not already, is to get into a group, to do life with others. And again, a shameless plug, we have a group for the ARC folks that meets on Wednesday nights right down that hallway. And I would encourage you to join. If you've not been a part, come this Wednesday at 6 o'clock and have an opportunity to connect with others in a group setting where you can begin to do life together, where you can begin to explore the Bible together. But more importantly, how do you actually bring the Bible alive in your own life? That's what the groups are all about. But even if you're not a group, invite somebody to lunch after church. Have intentional conversations with people that go beyond football and the weather. Have intentional conversations with people where you maybe even think of a question or two. Hey, what's bringing life to you lately? What are you excited about lately? Have intentional conversations with people. It goes beyond an hour. And be real. As we looked at last week, we are in this together. All right, number 3. We grow by practicing faith together. We grow by practicing faith together. Acts 2 verse 43 says, everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. God was working, lives were changing, and you get a sense that there are these conversations that seem to be going on, like, hey, did you hear about Bob? Did you hear about what God did through Bob's life? Hey, or what about Marie? And do you remember who she was and who she is today, and how God's been moving in her life? And now she actually was sharing, I just caught her in the hallway yesterday sharing about how many things God did in her life. There was this expectation and this anticipation that God was at work, and people showed up at church with this sense of awe and anticipation. I wonder what God's going to do today. I wonder what he's going to do. I wonder whose life he's going to touch. Maybe it'll be me. And I wonder what I could do with that and who I could encourage with that. Are you sharing what God's doing in your own life? The things he's showing you, the things he's revealing to you. I know you've shared many of those stories with me over these last several years. I've gotten to hear them, but I wonder how many other people in your life have gotten to hear how God has been moving in your life, what he's showing you, what he's teaching you. Paul later speaks to this in a letter to a church in Philippi, in chapter 2, verse 12. He says, "Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it is God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose." Now, a lot of times when you read verses like this, or even read the book of Philippians, we tend to think about ourselves as the reader, like Paul is talking just to us as an individual. But you have to remember that when Paul's writing these letters, unless it's like 1 Timothy or something like that, he's mostly writing them to churches. He's writing them to people. So really, the literal translation here would be, y'all work out your salvation with humility. See? Alabama is in the Bible, right? Y'all work out your salvation with humility, trusting God for the change. He's saying, this is not something we do by ourselves. This is not something we do in our prayer closet. He says, the way you work out your salvation is all y'all get together and work out your salvation. Meaning, if you're already saved, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, get together with other believers where you can process and work out and practice your salvation. Practice the gospel with one another. That's the goal here. Spiritual maturity is a shared journey of growth. Spiritual maturity is a shared journey of growth. So getting off the grid and going up into a mountain to live by yourself and thinking, I'm going to be the most spiritual person possible, is really a dream, because it's intended, the best spiritual maturity is going to be worked out with people. And guess what? People are difficult. I know this is a shock to you, right? But people are challenging. That means that anybody that you're going to start doing life with is going to rub you the wrong way, is going to do things differently than you do them. And guess what? You're going to get to practice fruit of the Spirit, like patience, right? Like kindness. Kindness to that person who just cut you off in traffic. That's hard. You want to talk about working out your salvation? We do it in the context of relationships. Trying to grow alone is like learning a foreign language by yourself. You might memorize certain words in that foreign language, but you need conversation with other people if you're ever going to know how to speak that language. Notice Paul doesn't say to work for your salvation, but to work out your salvation, to practice it. This is why I often have toyed with, and haven't really tried it yet, but I would love to, instead of calling them small groups, I'd love to call them life labs. It's never really caught on, but I'm just going to keep trying, right? But the idea is that the groups that we gather in are life laboratories. They're opportunities for us to work out our salvation, to be intentional about our relationships, That we get to try loving people and speaking life into each other and challenging each other and carrying each other's burdens and being honest with each other, being honest with our struggles. And if you can't learn to do this in a smaller setting with other Christians, I can tell you this, you'll never do it outside the church. If you can't practice what it looks like to love others in a small group, you won't be able to do it well outside of church. Because as Christians, we can gather together and we can give each other grace and say, hey, I'm just practicing. I know I said that wrong. I know that came out sideways. Can I try it again? Can I back up and do it better? And we can practice together in a laboratory type of setting where then we become the people that we're supposed to be, that God created us to be, so that we can go out into the world and do it differently. And so that's why, at least I know in our art group, our focus has been really less about the facilitator up front and more about the room. Every week I've come to the Wednesday night art group, I've been focused on saying, what can I learn from the people around here? Rather than what can I impress them that I know, I'm more saying, man, I want to see how God's speaking in your life. I want to hear what you think about that text. I want to unpack those things together so that we can figure out how to be the people we're meant to be. My biggest pet peeve, I think, in church activities is we often consume rather than participate. We consume religious goods and services rather than participate and engage with them. That's why my call and plea to you today is let's give up going to church and let's choose to be the church. All right, last one, number 4. Join the mission. Join the mission. Acts 2, verse 47 says, "And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." The Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. As they practiced, breaking bread in their homes and fellowshipping together and all of those things, as they practiced being the church, the outside world paid attention. And they said, I want some of that. I've never seen love like that. I've never seen somebody challenge somebody like that and them not walk away. I've never seen this kind of love. I want in. And it says every day the Lord drew in people to say, I want that. I want some of that. And here at the Ark, we have an incredible opportunity. We're small enough to be able to actually practice these things each and every week, even to some level on Sunday mornings, that as new folks come in, they begin to see the way we interact with one another and the way that we welcome them, and they begin to say, there's something different about this church. There's something different. God's here and God's doing something that I just haven't seen in a long, long time, and I want to be a part of it. And you can watch as the Lord adds to the number daily. So the church is the only institution that exists primarily for the benefit of those who are not yet its members. The church is the only institution that exists primarily for the benefit of those who are not its members. We're here, and we've not been immediately, ever thought about that? As soon as you became a Christian, why doesn't God just zap you right to heaven at that moment? It's because He needs His people here to be His ambassadors, as Paul calls it. You and I get an opportunity to be Jesus to the outside world. Matthew 28, a passage that I've shared with you several times in the past, says, "Therefore go." This is Jesus speaking, by the way. "Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." Can you imagine a rescue team that never left the station? They had all the gear, all the training, but they never left the station, never rescued anybody. You would say, well, that's a waste. DOJ should come in and cut them right away, right? Because they're obviously wasting taxpayer money, right? We would say that, but how many churches are created to be rescue units and we're not going out? We're not rescuing. The Great Commission is an all skate. Remember? Then you remember roller skating rinks, right? Like they'd play the music, and then they'd say, this next skate's a couple skate, right? And you're like, oh man, nobody loves me. Nobody wants to skate with me. My hands are way too sweaty anyway, right? And then, then finally the guy gets on and says, hey, this next skate is an all skate. And you're like, yes, back on, right? Well, this Great Commission is not just for the pastors. It's not just for the ministry leaders. The Great Commission is an all skate. You're invited into the game. And don't assume because in Alabama or in the South that everyone knows Jesus, because it's just not true. In fact, as I've hung out here for the last several years, there's a lot of people here who know about Jesus, but not a lot of people who know Jesus. And that really is the key. And so God has given you some, what we have been calling around here, our ones. Who's your one? Jesus said, when a man had 100 sheep, he left the 99 and went after the one who was not where he should have been, where he could have been. Who is your one? Who are you willing to step out and reach out to your one? If somebody doesn't come to your mind right now, if you don't have a name that pops in your head right away, then ask God for that. Say, God, reveal to me who my one is. Who is that person who I'm not sure where they are with God right now, but who is it that you're going to put on my heart that I can begin building intentional relationships with, that I can begin engaging in their life in very real and personal ways, and loving them enough that I might have an opportunity to share what has changed me, what has transformed me. You don't have to be heavy-handed about it. You don't have to have all this biblical knowledge. Some of you say, well, I don't know the Bible well enough to be able to do that. All you need to do is share your story. This is what I've discovered in life. This is what has mattered to me. And that's one of the things I've loved about this particular church is we've had opportunity to say, if you want some help, hey, why don't you bring them on to church? You know they're going to hear the gospel message. You know they're going to be able to hear something that you could then go out to lunch with them afterwards and say, hey, what'd you think about that? And there you have an inroad. You have an in-conversation to begin talking with that person about what they heard and about where they stand with Jesus. See, we must join the mission. It's not an optional thing. It's not for the superstar Christians. It's not for the people that know more of the Bible. All of those, by the way, are lies from the evil one, who would love to just get in your ear and try to justify and rationalize and give you every excuse. You want an excuse to not join the mission? You will find it in a second. Because the evil one loves to keep, if he can't make you not a Christian, he's going to make you as ineffective as a Christian as you can be. Because he knows that if you decide to get active with your faith and don't be like most of the people in church in America who just tend to sit and consume and evaluate and review and then go home and wait till next Sunday. But what if you chose to say, I'm raising my hand, count me in, I'm joining the team, I'm joining the mission. I want to be active in my faith in a way that transforms Northport and Tuscaloosa and who knows where beyond. But I'm going to choose to be a part of the mission of God. Don't lose sight of your why, because you'll miss true life. I'm telling you, I have not seen, and again, I grew up in a church, In fact, most of my early years of ministry was working really hard to try to motivate Christians to get active with their faith. I remember, I don't know if I've ever told you this story, I remember in junior year in high school, we went to a pretty large church, probably about 1,500 people, and they had a balcony at the church, and myself and all the other teenagers, we took up like the last 3 rows of the balcony. I mean, we couldn't get further away from the preacher if we tried. Like, we'd have to be in the parking lot listening on the radio. That would be the only way we could get further away from the pastor. And I remember having this moment in church where I looked down the pew, and all of my high school friends were passing notes to each other during the sermon. And I'm sure it wasn't like, that was a good point. I can't believe I'm going to read. No, they were not those kind of notes. They were all like, hey, what are we doing afterwards? Where are we going? You know, what's going on? Everybody's back and forth. And I looked down the row. I remember this so vividly in my mind. And I thought to myself, if this is what it means to be a Christian, I don't know that I want to be a part of it. Like, if being a Christian means you just show up at church while the pastor drones on and you just check out. And that was when God ignited in my heart to say, Jason, why don't you be a part of the solution and not part of the problem? And I was at that point ready to go to college for business administration was what I was going for at that point. And I decided, no, you know, I'm going to choose to go into ministry. So I changed my college, changed my major, and said, I'm going to focus on studying the Bible and preparing to light on fire those believers to help them to see what we're here for. And I'll tell you, as I started as a youth pastor. I was a youth pastor for 13 years. And I started taking our students on these missions trips. And it was the greatest thing because now you had these Christian kids who grew up in church now interacting with people face to face who didn't know Jesus. And it made their faith come alive because now they started asking questions. Pastor Jason, how do I answer this one? If God's so loving, how come my parent was shot? If God cares about me, how come we don't have any food to eat next week? And they're like, how do I answer that, Pastor Jason? And all of a sudden, they wanted to study the Bible. All of a sudden, my teenagers came alive in their faith in such a fresh way. Because I'll tell you, you will never know what it means to be a Christian until you let God use you in the life of someone else. That's when your faith comes alive. That's when you begin to understand what it means to be the church. So here's our big idea today. Church isn't a place you go, it's a people you become. Church isn't a place you go, it's a people that you become. See, if your faith stops at merely attending, you're missing the life that Jesus calls us to. If your faith stops at merely attending, you're missing the life that Jesus calls us to. So if I can summarize those 4 points, just with the first word of each of them, stay, engage, grow, and join. Stay connected to the source. Engage in biblical community. Grow by practicing your faith together. And join the mission so that you can be the church. I am part of the church. And I choose to engage intentionally, on purpose, for the glory of God.